Chicago, 1962. In the gold-trimmed dining room of a mansion in Oak Park, a banker raised his glass to the most powerful family in the city and was never seen again. Walter Everly, 41, wasn't a criminal. He was a man of structure, discipline, and perfectly balanced ledgers. But when the Mancini family, Chicago's most feared and respected Mafia dynasty, invited him to an intimate dinner, he went without hesitation. After all, they were clients. What happened that night remains a mystery. Walter's wife, Eleanor, reported him missing the next morning. The police found nothing. No blood, no traces, no body. Just his car parked exactly where he left it. The Mancinis claimed he left early, quiet, polite, uneventful, until a letter arrived, postmarked from a rural town no one had heard of, written in Walter's handwriting, and inside, a confession that shattered everything Eleanor thought she knew. Each page uncovered a piece of a life lived in silence, affairs, secrets, accounts that didn't match. And one final line: "If anything happens to me, don't trust the man who brings you flowers." Now Eleanor is on a hunt for the truth, through city archives, underground tunnels, and the memories of a marriage that may have been built on lies. Because the more she reads, the more she realizes her husband may not be the only one who vanished that night. He disappeared after dessert. She opened the letter, and nothing in her life made sense again. If you love true crime, buried secrets, and women who dig deeper when everyone else stops asking questions, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because some letters arrive too late, but reveal everything. Chapter 1. The Last Dinner, Chicago, October 1962. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times, its resonant tone bouncing off the dark oak paneling of the Everly home. Eleanor Everly adjusted her husband's bow tie one final time, her fingers lingering momentarily on the silk fabric. Outside, autumn leaves skittered across their driveway as the October wind picked up. Through the living room window, she could see the streetlights flickering on, casting long shadows across their manicured lawn. "You look worried," Walter said, his voice low and measured like always. At 41, Walter Everly carried himself with the precise dignity of a man who counted other people's money for a living. His dark hair was beginning to gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished appearance that matched his position as senior loan officer at First Chicago Trust. Eleanor smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his dinner jacket. "The Mancinis, Walter. You know what people say about them." The corner of Walter's mouth twitched, the closest he ever came to showing anxiety. "They're clients, Eleanor. Important ones. Anthony Mancini himself requested this dinner, at their home. Not at a restaurant. It's a courtesy. A formality." Walter checked his pocket watch, a family heirloom passed down from his grandfather. "The kind of courtesy you extend to people who keep 7 figures in your bank." The scent of Eleanor's gardenia perfume filled the space between them as she leaned in to straighten his pocket square. "Promise me you'll be home by 10, she whispered. Walter's grey eyes softened as he looked at his wife of 15 years. Eleanor's chestnut hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, revealing the delicate pearl earrings he'd given her for their anniversary. "I promise. It's just business talk over pasta." He'll be counting the minutes. The telephone rang, its shrill cry breaking their moment. "That'll be the car," Walter said, reaching for his overcoat. "Don't wait up if it runs late." "But you just promised." "And I meant it. But you know how these dinners can go. The Italians like to talk." He kissed her cheek, the familiar scent of his bay rum aftershave enveloping her. "I'll see you tonight. Love you." Eleanor watched from the doorway as Walter walked down the path to the sleek black Cadillac idling by the curb. The chauffeur, a broad-shouldered man with a face like carved stone, nodded respectfully as he opened the rear door. Walter turned back once, raising his hand in a small wave, the gold of his wedding band catching the last light of day. She couldn't have known it would be the last time she would see him. The Mancini estate in Oak Park was a Mediterranean-style mansion, its limestone facade glowing amber in the carefully positioned landscape lighting. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected in polished marble floors, and the air was heavy with the aromas of garlic, basil, and expensive cigars. Walter was led through a series of rooms, each more opulent than the last, until he reached a dining room dominated by a massive mahogany table. Anthony Mancini rose from his seat at the head, arms outstretched in welcome. Walter, finally we meet somewhere other than that sterile bank of yours. Mancini was in his early 60s, his once black hair now steel grey but still thick. His bespoke suit couldn't quite disguise the stocky frame that hinted at his humble beginnings. Mr. Mancini, thank you for the invitation. Walter's voice was professional. Controlled. Anthony, please. Mancini gestured around the table. My family. My son Salvatore, my daughter Maria, her husband Frank Cavallo. Walter nodded at each introduction, mentally cataloguing the faces. Salvatore, mid-30s, suspicious eyes, a scar along his jawline. Maria, elegant, quiet, watchful. Frank Cavallo, younger than his wife, handsome in a dangerous way, with fingers adorned with too many rings. And my associate, Robert Chambers, Mancini finished, indicating a slender man in an impeccable grey suit. This introduction caught Walter's attention. Chambers didn't fit the pattern. He was clearly not Italian. And something in his demeanour suggested education, refinement. His presence was a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. A pleasure, Walter said, shaking the man's hand. Chambers' grip was firm, his smile practiced. The pleasure's mine, Mr. Everly. I've heard so much about your financial acumen. A maid appeared with a crystal decanter, filling Walter's glass with ruby-red wine. The conversation flowed as easily as the alcohol. Discussions of investments, property acquisitions, the changing face of Chicago's business district. Walter maintained his professional demeanor, offering careful advice when asked, declining to comment on matters outside his expertise. By the time the dessert was served, cannoli with pistachios and chocolate, Walter had almost convinced himself this was indeed just business, almost, until Salvatore Mancini leaned forward, swirling his wine, and said, "Tell me, Mr. Everly, how familiar are you with the concept of creative accounting?" Walter set down his fork. "I believe in accurate ledgers, Mr. Mancini. Creativity belongs in art, not banking." A heavy silence fell over the table. Anthony Mancini raised his glass, his eyes never leaving Walter's face. "A toast, then. To men of principle, may they live interesting lives." The wine tasted bitter suddenly. Walter knew with absolute certainty that something fundamental had changed. The evening had just taken a sharp turn into territory he wasn't prepared to navigate. Across the table, Robert Chambers was watching him with an expression of calculated interest, as though Walter was a mathematical problem he was working to solve. Outside, clouds obscured the moon and the wind picked up, sending dead leaves scuttling across the hay. Mancini's immaculate lawn-like secrets trying to escape into the night. If this story has captured your imagination and you're eager to discover what happens next in Eleanor's search for truth, consider subscribing to this channel. Each chapter will take you deeper into the labyrinth of secrets surrounding Walter's disappearance and the mysterious man who brings flowers. Chapter 2. The morning after. Eleanor woke to the insistent ringing of the telephone. For a moment she lay disoriented, the bedroom still shrouded in pre-dawn darkness. Her hand reached automatically to Walter's side of the bed, finding only cold, untouched sheets. The bedside clock read 6:17 a.m. The telephone continued its harsh summons as Eleanor wrapped her robe tightly around herself, hurrying down the hallway. The hardwood floors were cold beneath her bare feet, and the October chill had seeped into the house overnight. "Hello?" Her voice was raspy with sleep. "Mrs. Everly? This is Daniel from the bank. Is Walter available?" Eleanor's fingers tightened around the receiver. "He's not here, Daniel. He had a dinner with the Mancini family last night. Perhaps he went in early." A pause. "No, ma'am. He has an 8 a.m. meeting with the board. He's never missed one." "I thought maybe he was unwell." "I'll call you back," Eleanor said quickly and hung up. The house felt suddenly too large, too quiet. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through the empty rooms as Eleanor moved methodically through them. Walter's slippers were still by his reading chair. His pajamas were folded neatly on his pillow. His toothbrush was dry. He hadn't come home. Eleanor's mind raced through possibilities, each more implausible than the last. Walter was predictable, reliable, the type of man who called if he was going to be 5 minutes late. The type who kept a spare tie in his desk drawer for emergencies. The type who reconciled their checkbook to the penny every Sunday afternoon, not the type to disappear. By 7:30 a.m., she was dressed in a simple navy dress, her hair neatly pinned back, mascara carefully applied to hide the evidence of her sleepless night. The police station on East 51st Street was bustling with morning activity. Uniformed officers with coffee cups, clerks shuffling papers, the acrid smell of cigarette smoke hanging in the air. "My husband didn't come home last night," she told the desk sergeant, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Walter Everly, he's a loan officer at First Chicago Trust." The sergeant looked up slowly. "Maybe he found himself some company, ma'am." Eleanor straightened her spine. "My husband had dinner with the Mancini family." "I'd like to speak to someone about that, please." The sergeant's expression changed subtly. He picked up his telephone without breaking eye contact. "Detective Morrison? There's a Mrs. Everly here. Her husband had dinner with the Mancinis last night. Hasn't seen him since." Detective James Morrison was a man whose face suggested he'd seen too much of human nature to be surprised anymore. His office smelled of stale coffee and old files, and the blinds filtered the morning sunlight into thin strips across his cluttered desk. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Everly," he said. Pushing aside a stack of reports to make space for his notepad, Eleanor recounted the previous evening with precision: the time Walter left, what he wore, his promised return by 10. Morrison's pen scratched across the paper, his face giving nothing away. "The chauffeur," Eleanor added. "He was a large man." "Walter didn't mention his name." Morrison nodded. "That would be Gino, one of Anthony's men. You know them?" "Everyone in Chicago knows the Mancinis, Mrs. Everly." He set down his pen. "Did your husband have any reason to be nervous about this dinner?" Eleanor hesitated. "Walter doesn't discuss his clients with me. But he seemed unusually tense. He kept saying it was just business." "And was it? Just business? What else would it be?" Morrison leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath his weight. "Mrs. Everly, banking for the Mancini family isn't like handling a housewife's Christmas club account. There are transactions that exist in gray areas. My husband is an honest man, Detective. I'm sure he is, which is exactly why I'm concerned." He stood, reaching for his coat. "I'll drive you to the Mancini estate. We'll ask a few questions, see what they say. Just like that? Won't you need a warrant or something?" Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This is Chicago, Mrs. Everly. We operate on a system of professional courtesies. The Mancini estate looked different in daylight, less enchanted, more fortress-like. The gardens were impeccable, every hedge perfectly trimmed, but Eleanor noticed the cameras discreetly positioned along the roofline, the thickness of the front gates, the way the groundskeeper's eyes followed their car. Anthony Mancini received them in his study, a room of leather-bound books and hunting trophies. He expressed what seemed like genuine concern, offering Eleanor a chair near the fireplace, where oak logs crackled and popped, pushing back the autumn chill. "Walter was a perfect gentleman," Mancini said, his hands folded across his substantial middle. "We discussed some business opportunities, enjoyed Mama's lasagna, and he left around 9:30. Said he wanted to get home to his lovely wife." "Did he seem worried?" "Distracted?" Morrison asked. "Not at all. He was his usual precise self. Even gave my Salvatore some sound advice about municipal bonds." "And he left alone?" Gino drove him back to his car. It was parked at the Carlton Club just a few blocks from here. Walter insisted he could drive himself home. Eleanor leaned forward. "Did he say anything before he left? Any message for me?" Mancini's expression softened almost paternally. "No, my dear. He just seemed eager to get home. After more questions that yielded nothing useful, they left." The detective insisted on driving Eleanor to the Carlton Club, where they found Walter's Buick sedan still parked exactly where he had left it the previous evening. "Why would he not take his car?" Eleanor whispered, staring at the familiar vehicle. Morrison circled the Buick, peering through the windows. "No signs of struggle. Keys aren't in the ignition. He either took them with him or gave them to someone. Or someone took them from him," Eleanor added. The detective didn't contradict her. The bank was her next stop. Samuel Kleinfeld, the bank president, received her in his office overlooking the Chicago River. The walls were paneled in rich cherry wood, and a portrait of the bank's founder hung imposingly behind his desk. "This is most concerning." "Mrs. Everly," Kleinfeld said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Walter is one of our most reliable officers. The board meeting this morning, well, his absence was noted. Has he been under any unusual pressure recently?" "Any difficult clients?" Eleanor asked, watching Kleinfeld's face carefully. Banking is always pressure, Mrs. Everly, but Walter handles it better than most. He has a gift for numbers, for patterns. He hesitated. The Mancini accounts are complex, certainly, but nothing Walter couldn't manage. Complex how? Kleinfeld smiled thinly. Client confidentiality prevents me from elaborating. But I can assure you everything Walter handles for us is above board. Eleanor didn't believe him. Something in his too careful tone, the way his fingers drummed nervously on the polished desk surface, told her there was more to the story. I'd like to see his office, she said. Kleinfeld looked surprised. I'm not sure that would be appropriate. My husband is missing, Mr. Kleinfeld. I'm trying to find him. Surely that's more important than bank protocol. Walter's office was meticulous, like everything else in his life. Files aligned perfectly on shelves, pens arranged by color, a single photograph of Eleanor on his desk. Nothing seemed out of place or disturbed. Was he working on anything unusual? She asked, running her fingers along the smooth wood of his desk. Not that I'm aware of, Kleinfeld replied, hovering nervously in the doorway. Eleanor noticed a small desk calendar, each date neatly crossed off. October 11th, yesterday, had a single notation. Mancini, 7 p.m. October 12th had another. ML, warehouse, 10 a.m. What's this? She asked, pointing to today's entry. Kleinfeld leaned forward, squinting. I don't know. Walter doesn't share his personal appointments. ML, Eleanor repeated. Could it be Maria Lombardi? She was at the dinner last night. Mancini's daughter. Kleinfeld's face paled slightly. Mrs. Everly, I really think we should leave Walter's office as it is, for when he returns. By early afternoon, Eleanor returned to her empty house. Detective Morrison had promised to file an official missing persons report, though his expression suggested limited optimism. Sometimes men just need to disappear for a bit, he'd said not unkindly. Give it 24 hours. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in around her. The copper kettle on the stove reflected her distorted image as she moved to prepare tea, a routine action in a day that had spun completely out of routine. The mail slot in the front door creaked open, followed by the soft thump of letters hitting the hallway floor. Among the usual bills and circulars was a plain envelope addressed to Eleanor in familiar handwriting, Walter's precise, slightly slanted script. The postmark was from a small town she'd never heard of, nearly 100 miles away. Her hands trembled as she opened it, unfolding several pages of Walter's personal stationery. My dearest Eleanor, it began. By the time you read this, I will be gone. There are things I've never told you, things you deserve to know. Our life together has been built on more than love. It's been built on silence, and now that silence ends. Eleanor sank slowly into a kitchen chair, the forgotten kettle beginning to whistle on the stove, as she read the first of many secrets her husband had kept. Chapter 3. The Letter. The kettle's whistle rose to a piercing scream, but Eleanor barely heard it. The letter in her hands seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, Walter's familiar handwriting swimming before her eyes. She read the opening paragraph 3 times before the words began to make sense. My dearest Eleanor, by the time you read this, I will be gone. There are things I've never told you, things you deserve to know. Our life together has been built on more than love. It's been built on silence, and now that silence ends, I am not the man you believe me to be. The careful, cautious banker who measures life in columns of numbers and predictable routines is only part of who I am. There is another Walter Everly, one I've kept hidden even from myself. It began 3 years ago. The bank was struggling after the Western Industries collapse. Do you remember those weeks when I couldn't sleep? When I would sit in my study until dawn, claiming to review investment portfolios? I was actually trying to save not just my career, but the entire institution. That's when Anthony Mancini approached me. He needed someone who understood banking regulations, someone who could navigate the labyrinth of federal oversight, someone respectable. I told myself it was just financial advising, legal work that happened to benefit a family with questionable connections. I was a fool. Eleanor finally registered the kettle's insistent cry. She rose mechanically, moved it from the heat and returned to the letter. Outside, the afternoon light had taken on the golden quality of late October, filtering through the maple tree in their front yard and casting dappled shadows across the kitchen table. What began as consultation became complicity. Small concessions at first, overlooking the source of certain deposits, creating shell companies with legitimate-seeming purposes, helping them acquire properties through proxies. I told myself no one was getting hurt. I told myself I was protecting the bank, protecting our future. The truth is, I enjoyed it. The intellectual challenge, the secret knowledge, the respect in Anthony Mancini's eyes when I solved a problem his usual associates couldn't touch. For the first time in my life, I felt indispensable. There have been others, Eleanor, other secrets. The weekend banking conferences in New York were meetings with contacts, people who helped move money between institutions without raising flags. The late nights at the office were often spent creating paper trails that led nowhere. And yes, there have been women. Not many, not affairs of the heart, but moments of weakness. Vivian, the teller from the West Side branch. Rebecca, Anthony's secretary. Meaningless encounters born of this double life I created, where Walter the banker and Walter the fixer became increasingly separated from Walter the husband. I am not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. Eleanor's hands were shaking so badly now that she had to set the letter down. The room seemed to tilt around her, familiar objects. The porcelain fruit bowl Walter had brought back from a business trip to Milan. The landscape painting they'd purchased on their 10th anniversary, suddenly foreign and suspect. Had any of it been real? She forced herself to continue reading. Last month I began to understand how deep I had gone. The Mancinis are expanding their operations into legitimate businesses, construction, waste management, transportation. But the money funding these ventures comes from darker sources. I was asked to create a network of accounts that would effectively launder millions of dollars. I refused. For the first time in 3 years, I said no. Anthony was surprisingly understanding. He thanked me for my service, told me I had earned my retirement. I thought I was free. Then I received photographs in the mail. You shopping at Marshall Fields. You tending your roses in the garden. You having lunch with your sister at the Palmer House. The message was clear without words. I know too much to simply walk away, so I've made arrangements. This dinner tonight is a calculated risk. I'm bringing something to the Mancinis that they desperately want. Ledgers that document every transaction, every shell company, every property acquisition. My insurance policy. If all goes well, we will have a new life waiting for us. A small town where banking is straightforward, where ledgers balance honestly, where I can try to become the man you always believed me to be. If you're reading this, one of two things has happened. Either I've successfully negotiated our freedom, but couldn't risk contacting you directly yet, or something has gone wrong. In the latter case, there are things you must know. Eleanor turned the page, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The next section contained specific instructions, the location of a safe deposit box at Continental Illinois Bank, not his own institution, the name of an attorney in Springfield who held documents, a list of names and dates that meant nothing to her. The final paragraph made her blood run cold. Trust no one connected to this situation, Eleanor, especially not Robert Chambers. He presents himself as a business associate of the Mancinis, but he is something else entirely. I don't know his true agenda, but he has been asking too many questions, watching too carefully. If anything happens to me, don't trust the man who brings you flowers. I have loved you, Eleanor, even when I betrayed you. Whatever else was false, that truth remains. Forever yours, Walter. Eleanor sat motionless as the kitchen darkened around her, the letter lying flat on the table like a living thing that had exhausted itself. The confession, both shocking and somehow unsurprising, settled into her consciousness, rearranging what she thought she knew about her 15-year marriage. The telephone's ring startled her from her stupor. She answered mechanically. Mrs. Everly, Detective Morrison. We found your husband's briefcase. In a dumpster 3 blocks from the Carlton Club. Empty, except for his reading glasses and a handkerchief. Any signs of... She couldn't finish the sentence. No blood or signs of struggle, Morrison assured her. The weird thing is, the lock wasn't forced. Either Walter opened it himself or someone had his key. Eleanor thought of the letter. Detective, there's something you should see. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and stared at the letter. Then, making a sudden decision, she folded it carefully and placed it in the hidden compartment of her jewelry box, the one Walter had given her on their 5th anniversary, never knowing she had discovered its secret drawer years ago. By the time Morrison arrived, Eleanor had composed herself. She showed him Walter's calendar with the mysterious ML warehouse appointment, but said nothing about the letter. Something in Walter's warnings about trusting no one had resonated deeply. Until she understood what she was dealing with, the letter would remain her secret. ML could be Maria Lombardi, Mancini's daughter, Morrison said, echoing her earlier speculation. But which warehouse? The Mancini's own property all over Chicago. Could your department find out? Morrison rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Maybe, but it would raise flags. The Mancini's have friends at City Hall, friends in the department. What are you saying, Detective? I'm saying tread carefully, Mrs. Everly. Your husband was involved with powerful people. After Morrison left, promising to check hospitals and continue the search, Eleanor sat alone in Walter's study. The room smelled of his pipe tobacco and leather-bound books. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times, 24 hours since Walter had left for dinner with the Mancini's. Eleanor opened his desk drawer, searching for clues he might have left behind. Bank statements, insurance policies, property tax records, all meticulously organized. Nothing seemed out of place until she noticed a small key taped to the bottom of the drawer. A key to what? The doorbell rang, cutting through the silence of the house. Eleanor froze, Walter's warning echoing in her mind. Don't trust the man who brings you flowers. Through the curtained window of the study, she could make out the silhouette of a man standing on her porch, holding what appeared to be a bouquet. Chapter 4. The warehouse. Eleanor stood frozen behind the curtain, watching the silhouette on her porch. The bouquet in the man's hands seemed to mock Walter's warning. After a moment's hesitation, she moved to the hallway telephone and dialed Morrison's office number, letting it ring beside her as she approached the door. When she finally opened it, keeping the chain latched, she was surprised to see not Robert Chambers, but a face she recognized from the previous night's dinner, Frank Cavallo. Maria Mancini's husband, Mrs. Everly, he said, his voice smoother than she remembered. I wanted to express my family's concern about Walter. These are from Maria. He extended a bouquet of white lilies. Eleanor left the flowers hanging in the space between them. That's very thoughtful, Mr. Cavallo, but it's late for social calls. Actually, I hoped we might talk. Cavallo lowered his voice. About Walter's appointment today. At the warehouse. The telephone in the hallway stopped ringing as Morrison's answering service picked up. Eleanor made a split-second decision and closed the door, unlatching the chain before reopening it. Come in, Mr. Cavallo. He stepped inside, his expensive cologne mingling with the lily fragrance. Eleanor led him to the living room, deliberately choosing Walter's armchair for herself, leaving Cavallo the sofa where guests usually sat. How did you know about that appointment? She asked directly. Cavallo placed the lilies on the coffee table between them. Walter mentioned it last night. He seemed anxious to meet with Maria. Why would my husband have a meeting with your wife? Maria handles certain real estate interests for the family. I believe Walter was helping restructure some investments. Cavallo's dark eyes studied Eleanor carefully. You didn't know. My husband keeps his professional life separate from our home. The present tense was deliberate, a small act of faith that Walter was still alive, noble, but perhaps not practical. Cavallo leaned forward. Mrs. Everly, I don't believe Walter simply disappeared. He struck me as a man of careful plans. What are you suggesting? That perhaps this disappearance was strategic. Cavallo's expression remained neutral, but something calculating flickered behind his eyes. Walter had access to sensitive financial information. Information that various parties might find valuable. Eleanor thought of the letter hidden in her jewelry box. You think he ran? I think he's a survivor. The question is, what did he take with him? The insinuation hung in the air between them. Eleanor maintained her composure, though her heart raced. I wouldn't know. As I said, my husband's business remained at the bank. Perhaps. But if you should find anything, records, ledgers, names, I hope you'll contact me before taking it elsewhere. Cavallo produced a business card, placing it beside the lilies. For your safety, Mrs. Everly, Chicago can be complicated. After showing him out, Eleanor leaned against the closed door, her mind working furiously. Cavallo's visit confirmed Walter's claims about his entanglement with the Mancini's. But what was this warehouse appointment? And was Maria Lombardi the mysterious ML? The next morning, Eleanor called Detective Morrison to report Cavallo's visit. He's testing you, Morrison said, trying to determine how much you know. About what? A pause. Your husband's banking activities weren't always straightforward, Mrs. Everly. You're suggesting Walter was helping them launder money. I'm suggesting nothing. But the Mancinis don't invite bank officers to family dinners just for financial advice on municipal bonds. Eleanor thought about the letter again. Detective. If someone wanted to find a warehouse connected to the Mancinis, where would they look? Maka. Officially. I couldn't help with that. His tone changed subtly. Unofficially? Try the property records at City Hall. Look for companies with ML in the name. City Hall's records department was a labyrinth of file cabinets and dust-covered ledgers. The clerk, a young woman with cat-eye glasses and an air of perpetual boredom, barely glanced up from her. Romance novel, as Eleanor requested access to property records. Hours of methodical searching finally yielded results. ML Holdings owned a warehouse on the south side near the stockyards. The company's listed officer was Maria Lombardi, maiden name of Maria Mancini. Eleanor copied down the address and left, the autumn afternoon already fading toward dusk. She should call Morrison with this information. The reasonable thing would be to let the detective investigate. Instead, she found herself driving south, navigating streets that grew increasingly industrial. The neighborhood transformed from respectable brownstones to factories and warehouses. The air thick with stockyard smells and coal smoke. ML Holdings warehouse was a massive brick building with few windows, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A sign indicated office hours Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The main gate was locked, but a side entrance stood slightly ajar, either an oversight or an invitation. Eleanor parked a block away and sat in her car, contemplating her next move. This was madness. She should leave, call Morrison, wait for professionals to investigate. Yet something drove her forward. The need to understand what had happened to Walter, to see for herself what had drawn him to this place. The warehouse office was deserted but unlocked. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and a large desk dominated the center of the room. It took Eleanor only moments to spot Walter's influence. The meticulous organization of the folders, the color-coded labels, the precise alignment of office supplies. He had been here recently. She began searching drawers, finding shipping manifests for furniture imports from Italy, payroll records for warehouse staff, utility bills, all seemingly legitimate. Then, in the bottom drawer of the desk, hidden beneath shipping catalogs, a leather-bound ledger with the initials ML embossed in gold. The ledger contained columns of numbers, dates, and code names. Some entries were circled in red ink, Walter's distinctive hand. Others had question marks beside them. The final page contained a note in Walter's writing. Cross-reference with Union Bank accounts. Possible discrepancy. A photograph slipped from between the pages. Walter standing beside a man Eleanor recognized as Cavallo, both in fishing gear, holding an impressive catch. Their posture suggested familiarity, friendship even. The date stamp on the back read, July 1961. Walter had never mentioned fishing with Frank Cavallo, had never mentioned knowing him at all before the dinner. More lies. More secrets. The sound of a car door slamming outside froze Eleanor in place. Footsteps approached, voices murmuring. She clutched the ledger and photo, looking frantically for somewhere to hide. Too late. The office door swung open, revealing Frank Cavallo and Robert Chambers, the slender, refined man from the Mancini dinner. Mrs. Everly, Chambers said, his tone suggesting he'd been expecting her. How enterprising of you to find this place. I was looking for my husband, Eleanor said, straightening her spine, and instead, you found his secrets. Cavallo nodded toward the ledger in her hands. Where is Walter? What have you done with him? Chambers stepped forward, his movements fluid and controlled. Perhaps the better question is, what has Walter done? Eleanor clutched the ledger tighter. I want to know if my husband is alive. He's alive, Chambers confirmed. For now. What does that mean? It means, Cavallo interjected, that Walter's future depends largely on what happens to those records you're holding. Eleanor glanced down at the ledger. This? It's just numbers. Those just numbers document 5 years of financial transactions that certain parties would prefer remained private, Chambers explained. Your husband was meticulous in his record-keeping. Unfortunately for him, He was also meticulous in creating his insurance policy. Walter wouldn't steal from clients, Eleanor protested. Cavallo laughed, the sound echoing in the empty office. Steal? No, but Walter did something more dangerous. He documented every transaction, every transfer. Names, dates, amounts. He was protecting himself, Chambers added. Smart man, your husband. He knew working with the Mancinis carried risks, so he kept detailed records as leverage. Eleanor's mind raced to process this information. You're saying Walter was blackmailing the Mancinis? Insurance, blackmail, semantics, Chambers shrugged. What matters is that Walter disappeared with copies of those records the night of the dinner. Records that could cause significant problems for many powerful people. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. And you think I have these records? We think Walter would have ensured you could find them, Chambers said. A man like your husband, precise, methodical, he would have had a contingency plan. Cavallo moved closer, his expression softening into something almost sympathetic. Mrs. Everly, Eleanor, we're not your enemies. In fact, we may be the only friends you have right now. Friends don't make threats about my husband's future. It's not a threat, Chambers clarified. It's a reality. Walter has put himself in a precarious position. The ledger you're holding is just a fragment of what he took. If those complete records reach certain authorities, people will go to prison. People who don't believe in fair trials or rehabilitation. Eleanor's mind raced back to Walter's letter, to the safe deposit box he'd mentioned. Why are you telling me this? Because we need your help, Cavallo said simply. Walter trusts you. He would have left you a way to access those records. And if I help you get them. Chambers smiled thinly. Then Walter comes home. You both get a fresh start. Perhaps somewhere warm, Florida. The Mancinis have connections there. Banking positions for a man of Walter's talents. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Chambers didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached inside his jacket and withdrew an envelope, handing it to Eleanor. Inside was a pressed flower, a forget-me-not, and a note in Walter's handwriting. E. Trust your instincts. Not everyone is who they appear to be. Remember Montrose Beach? The key fits there too. Love W. Eleanor's hand trembled. The message was clearly meant for her alone, referencing their private history. Their first date had been at Montrose Beach. But how had Chambers acquired it? Walter left this with someone he trusted, Chambers said, reading her confusion. Someone who recognized that his plan was putting you both in danger. We're offering you a way out of this mess, Cavallo added. Help us recover the complete records before they fall into the wrong hands. And which hands would those be? Eleanor asked sharply. Chambers and Cavallo exchanged a glance. There are federal agencies very interested in the Mancini family's business dealings, Chambers said carefully. Agencies that wouldn't hesitate to use Walter as a pawn in their larger game. A sudden realization hit Eleanor. The pieces clicked into place. Chambers' refined manner. His position as an associate rather than a family member. The careful way he spoke about federal agencies. You're not working for the Mancinis, she said slowly. You're with the government? Chambers' expression didn't change, but a new tension filled the air. The situation is more complicated than you realize, Mrs. Everly, he replied evenly. There are layers within layers. The important thing is that Walter's records need to be secured, for everyone's protection, including yours. Cavallo looked uncomfortable. What matters is getting those records and ensuring Walter's safe return, he insisted. We can sort out the rest afterward. Eleanor clutched the ledger tighter, her mind racing. Who was telling the truth? Who could she trust? Walter's warning echoed in her mind. Don't trust the man who brings you flowers. But which man had he meant? Cavallo had brought lilies to her door, but Chambers had delivered Walter's pressed forget-me-not. I need time to think, she said finally. Time is a luxury none of us have, Chambers replied. But I can give you until tomorrow morning. After that, events may move beyond anyone's control. Where do I find you when I've decided? We'll find you, Cavallo assured her. We always do. They left her there in the warehouse office, the leather-bound ledger still in her hands. The photograph of Walter and Cavallo, like a silent accusation of all she hadn't known about her husband's life. Eleanor waited until their car had disappeared before hurrying to her own. The autumn evening had fully descended now, streetlights casting pools of yellow light on the empty industrial streets. She placed the ledger on the passenger seat, her mind sorting through the fragments of truth and deception. Walter was alive. That much seemed certain. But he was being held somewhere by whom? The Mancinis, Chambers, and whatever agency he represented. Was Cavallo playing both sides? Most importantly, what had Walter hidden and where? The key she'd found taped beneath his desk drawer suddenly took on new significance. The key fits there too, Walter had written. Montrose Beach, their special place. But what at Montrose Beach could be unlocked? As she drove north toward home, Eleanor made a decision. She wouldn't contact Morrison yet. Tomorrow morning, she would visit Montrose Beach with the mysterious key. Whatever Walter had hidden, she would find it first. Then and only then would she decide whom to trust. The night stretched ahead, full of questions and few answers. But for the first time since Walter's disappearance, Eleanor felt something like hope, fragile, uncertain, but present. Her husband had left her breadcrumbs to follow. Now she just needed to be clever enough, brave enough, to follow them to wherever he was waiting. Chapter 5. The truth in the shadow's dawn broke over Lake Michigan in streaks of amber and rose, the November chill carrying the scent of water and approaching winter. Eleanor parked near Montrose Beach, the shoreline deserted at this early hour. Waves lapped gently at the sand, and a few dedicated joggers dotted the distance, their breath visible in the morning air. She clutched Walter's key in her gloved hand, its brass surface cold against her palm even through the leather. Remember Montrose Beach? The key fits there too. His cryptic message had kept her awake all night, her mind cycling through possibilities. What at this beach could possibly require a key? Their first date had been here, a summer picnic where Walter had arrived with a wicker basket containing precisely measured portions of fried chicken, potato salad, and lemonade in a thermos. She had teased him about his exactitude, and he had blushed, admitting that he'd actually calculated the optimal ratio of food to drinks for a beach outing. It had been endearing then, his need for order, for control. Now she wondered if those same traits had led him into an impossible situation, documenting crimes he couldn't unknow, creating an insurance policy that had become a death sentence. Eleanor walked along the shoreline, scanning the area. The beach proper revealed nothing unusual, just sand, driftwood, and the occasional piece of lake-polished glass. She turned her attention to the facilities nearby. The boathouse, the concession stands closed for the season, the row of storage lockers where summer visitors could secure their valuables while swimming. The lockers. Eleanor approached them slowly, studying the numbered metal doors. Each had a small keyhole beneath the number. Walter's key had no markings, no indication of which locker it might open. She would have to try them all. Starting with locker 1, she methodically inserted the key, finding no match. 2, 3, 4, nothing. By the 15th locker, her fingers were numb from the cold and doubt had begun to creep in. Perhaps she'd misunderstood the message. Perhaps this was the wrong beach entirely. At locker 23, the key slid in smoothly and turned with a satisfying click. Eleanor held her breath as she pulled the metal door open. Inside was a waterproof document case, secured with a combination lock. The 3-digit code stumped her momentarily, until she remembered 523, their wedding anniversary, May 23rd. Walter used it for everything from his briefcase to their home safe. The lock opened on the first try. Inside the case were several items: a thin stack of documents, a small notebook, an envelope containing what appeared to be photographs, and a voice recorder, the kind lawyers used for dictation. With trembling fingers, Eleanor pressed play. Walter's voice filled the small space between her and the locker, so familiar it made her heart ache. "Eleanor, if you're listening to this, then you've followed my breadcrumbs. Good girl, I always said you were smarter than me." A pause, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "Time is short, so I'll be direct. The documents in this case detail 5 years of financial transactions between the Mancini family and various businesses, politicians, and law enforcement officials across Chicago. Names, dates, amounts, everything. I began keeping these records to protect myself. An insurance policy, I told myself. But the truth is, I enjoyed the power it gave me. The leverage. God help me, I became as corrupt as they were, just in a different way. 2 months ago, I was approached by Robert Chambers. He claimed to be with the Treasury Department, investigating money laundering operations in Chicago. He wanted my cooperation, offered protection, a new identity, a fresh start for both of us. I was ready to say yes, ready to turn it all over. And then I discovered Chambers wasn't who he claimed to be. He works for someone else, someone who wants the Mancinis eliminated for their own reasons. I don't know who, but it's not the government. At least not officially. Trust no one, Eleanor. Not Morrison, he's on the Mancini payroll. Not Chambers with his false promises. And especially not Frank Cavallo. Walter's voice hardened. Cavallo cultivated me for years. Fishing trips. Drinks at the club. He made me believe I was special, valuable. It was all manipulation to get me deeper into their operation. The only person you might trust, and I emphasize might, is Maria Lombardi. She wants out as badly as I do. Her warehouse has become our meeting place. She's helped me prepare all this. I'm sorry, Eleanor. Sorry for the lies, for the danger I've put you in. The dinner with the Mancinis tonight is my last play. I'm going to offer them a deal. The original records in exchange for our freedom. A complete separation. If it works, I'll contact you through the usual channels. If it doesn't, the recording paused, the sound of Walter taking a deep breath audible. If it doesn't, then these copies are your protection. Use them wisely. The names in the red folder would do anything to keep these documents buried. The names in the blue folder might help you. People with their own reasons to see the Mancinis answer for their crimes. I love you, Eleanor, more than I've shown these past years. Whatever happens, remember that. The recording ended. Eleanor stood motionless, the cold Chicago morning forgotten as she absorbed Walter's words. She opened the document case again, examining its contents more carefully. The red folder, the blue folder, the photographs, mostly of meetings between men she didn't recognize, though some faces were familiar from newspaper photos. A judge, a city councilman, the police commissioner. A new sound intruded on her thoughts, footsteps on the sand. She turned to find Maria Lombardi approaching, her elegant figure bundled against the cold in a camel hair coat, dark hair tucked beneath a silk scarf. You found it, Maria said simply. Not a question. Eleanor nodded. Where is my husband? Safe for now. The Mancinis are holding him at one of their properties in Wisconsin. A hunting lodge, remote. Maria glanced around nervously. We don't have much time. Chambers has been watching you since yesterday. Who is he really working for? The Brennan family from New York. They've wanted to expand into Chicago for years. Taking down the Mancinis would create a vacuum they could fill. Maria moved closer. Your husband was caught between two crime families, Mrs. Everly, not between criminals and the law. Eleanor clutched the document case. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't, but I'm offering you Walter back tonight. I've made arrangements. Why would you betray your own family? Maria's expression hardened. The Mancinis stopped being my family the day they forced me to marry Frank Cavallo to secure a business alliance. I've been looking for a way out for years. Walter offered me that chance. A car door slammed in the distance. Maria tensed. They're coming. You have to decide now, Mrs. Everly. Give me the documents and I'll ensure Walter is released tonight. 8 o'clock. The old lighthouse at Burnham Harbor. And if this is a trick, Maria's eyes met hers directly. Then you've lost nothing but copies. Walter said the originals are secured elsewhere. Eleanor thought rapidly, weighing options, measuring risks. The documents were her only leverage, her only protection. Yet they were also the reason Walter was in danger. How do I know Walter is still alive? Maria reached into her coat pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. He wrote this yesterday. The note was brief in Walter's handwriting. Trust Maria, no one else. I'm unharmed. The warehouse records are the key. Eleanor made her decision. She removed the red folder from the case and handed it to Maria, keeping the blue folder, the photographs, and the recording. Half now, she said firmly. Half when I see my husband alive. A hint of respect flickered in Maria's eyes. 8 o'clock. Come alone. Maria hurried away, disappearing around the boathouse, just as another figure appeared from the opposite direction. Robert Chambers, walking purposefully across the sand. Eleanor quickly closed the document case and shut the locker. The key secure in her pocket. Mrs. Everly, Chambers called. What a coincidence finding you here. Is it? Eleanor replied coolly. I think we both know it's not. Chambers smiled thinly. I hope you're not making arrangements you'll regret. The Mancinis can't be trusted, and you can. I've been transparent about my interest in those records. Transparent? Eleanor laughed bitterly. You never mentioned you work for the Brennan family, not the Treasury Department. Chambers' expression flickered for just a moment, surprise quickly masked. You've been misinformed, have I? Walter recorded everything, Mr. Chambers. Your real offers, your real intentions. It was a bluff. Walter's recording hadn't specifically named the Brennans, but it hit its mark. Chambers' composure cracked slightly. The situation is complicated, Mrs. Everly. There are players you don't understand. I understand enough. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. I understand that my husband is a pawn in a game between two criminal enterprises. I understand that you, Frank Cavallo, Detective Morrison, you're all just pieces on someone else's board. And what does that make you? The one changing the rules. Eleanor stepped around him. Goodbye, Mr. Chambers. This isn't over, he called after her. No, she agreed without turning. It's just beginning. 8 o'clock found Eleanor waiting at Burnham Harbour, the old lighthouse a dark silhouette against the night sky. The temperature had dropped further, and the wind off the lake cut through her wool coat like knives. She had spent the afternoon reviewing the contents of the blue folder, making copies at a public library, and mailing sets to 3 different people. Walter's attorney in Springfield, a reporter at the Tribune known for exposing corruption, and her sister in Milwaukee, with explicit instructions to release everything if Eleanor didn't contact her by morning. Insurance upon insurance. A car approached, headlights cutting through the darkness. Eleanor tensed, clutching her handbag containing the blue folder and Walter's recording. The car stopped. The driver's door opened, and Maria Lombardi emerged. She walked around to the passenger side and opened that door as well. Walter stepped out. Even in the dim light, Eleanor could see he looked exhausted, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his face drawn with fatigue. But he was alive, whole, moving toward her with an expression of such naked relief and love that it made her throat tighten. Eleanor, he breathed, and then she was in his arms, his familiar scent, now tinged with something harsher, more desperate, enveloping her. The documents? Maria asked quietly from behind them. Eleanor reluctantly pulled away from Walter, reaching into her handbag to produce the blue folder. As promised, Maria took it, quickly leafing through the contents. This isn't all of it. It's all you're getting, Walter said firmly. The rest is our protection. You have the names you needed to establish your new identity. We keep the rest as insurance against both families. Maria considered this for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. The boat is waiting. It will take you across to Michigan. From there you're on your own. And you? Eleanor asked. I have my own arrangements. Maria offered a thin smile. Perhaps we'll meet again someday in different circumstances. As Maria turned to leave, Walter called after her. The Mancinis will search for all of us. Let them search, Maria replied without turning back. Some things are worth the risk. They watched as she drove away, her taillights disappearing into the Chicago night. Walter squeezed Eleanor's hand. I have so much to explain, he began. Later, she said, leading him toward the small boat bobbing at the dock. We have time now. As they pulled away from the shore, the Chicago skyline glittered like stars brought down to earth, beautiful from a distance, concealing its darkness. Eleanor watched the city recede, thinking of the life they were leaving behind. The lies, the dangers, the comfortable fictions they had both maintained. Walter put his arm around her shoulders. Are you afraid? Eleanor considered the question. No, she realized with some surprise. For the first time in days, I'm not afraid at all. Whatever waited for them across the lake, a new city, new names, new challenges, it would be built on truth. Hard, uncomfortable truth, but truth nonetheless. The kind that could serve as a foundation for something real. The boat cut through the dark water, carrying them toward uncertainty. Behind them, Chicago's lights continued to shine, indifferent to their departure, to the small dramas that played out in its shadows every day. People making choices, people living with consequences, people discovering that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones we keep from ourselves. If this story resonated with you, illuminating the complexities of truth, trust, and the secrets we all carry, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. More stories await, each one exploring the shadows and light of human experience, the choices that define us, and the courage it takes to face hard truths. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that feel like they could happen to any of us, in any city, on any ordinary day that suddenly becomes extraordinary.